name is Pat Domingue. I'm founder of our ministries, Bible study author, and teacher. This past week, my husband and I spent a week at the beach celebrating 26 years of marriage. And in those 26 years, one thing that he and I have both learned that has helped us to have a happier, healthier, thriving marriage is the necessity to put our own desires and to the side for the sake of the other. Now, I will tell you that both of us would say that this is not easy. It did not come easy for either one of us. We both were and still are self-centered people who want what we want. But the irony of self-centeredness is that it almost always backfires on us. And ironically, releasing our own desires for the sake of the other, many times, not always, but it normally benefits us. So usually self-centeredness in a marriage happens when one person wants to dominate for the sake of their self-centered needs. Now, I remember hearing Jimmy Evans of Marriage Today discussing the equality of a husband and wife in a marriage. And he talked about the problems that arose from either one in the marriage, either one of the marriage partners trying to dominate. And I wish I could remember exactly what he said and how he said it, so I may botch it up a little bit, but sorry, Jimmy Evans, but it did really impact me. Jimmy Evans basically said that when one or the other of us in the marriage try to become the dominant one, that we are then trying to take God's role. And he went on to say that God is supposed to be the dominant one in a marriage. Well, I was just blown away, because when I think about this in relation to us in all aspects of life, I believe it shows that our own self-centeredness could very well be our own attempt, possibly and probably unknowingly, but to dethrone God. So are you self-centered or God-centered? So I'll answer that question. My answer is yes and yes. So how about you? I wish I could say that it's not true, but the reality is that there are times in my life that I am super self-centered. And at the same time, there are times in my life that I am very much God-centered. As I've grown in my relationship with God over the past 26 years, I would say that recognizing self-centeredness in me is easier, but I'm not sure that I can say that setting myself aside is much easier. And thank you to Paul for his willingness to be real with us about his personal struggle with self. In Romans 7:15, Paul wrote, "For what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice. But what I hate, I do." Paul's love and devotion to Jesus was over the top. He willingly suffered like few others for the sake of Christ. But even with such a solid devotion and sacrificial heart toward God, he struggled just like the rest of us. The truth is, death to self is hard. It does not come easy, and it doesn't come natural, but instead supernatural. And Paul is the same one who wrote Galatians 2:20, where he said, "I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me." Yet, Paul still struggled. As I said, thank you again, Paul. I needed to know that I'm not alone, because while I do love Jesus with my whole heart, myself gets in the way of me staying God-centered. So no doubt in my mind why God uses the analogy of the relationship between a husband and wife as a picture of our relationship with him, because in both relationships, self-sacrifice is necessary, because self-centeredness ultimately attempts to dethrone God. Now, could our self-centeredness be our attempt to dethrone God? I never really thought about a great deal about this true heart of self-centeredness because honestly, I just don't like the way I feel when I think about it. And most of us avoid thinking about things that make us feel ways we don't like. So what is it that we don't like about thinking about ourselves in relation to self-centeredness? I think we all recognize that self-centeredness is not a good thing. But if we acknowledge that self-centeredness resides inside, we also recognize the need to make changes. And making changes in this area is really awful because we all want what we want. Now, I'm sorry that I may have included you in my rambling about self-centeredness. Maybe it isn't your struggle. Maybe my struggle with self-centeredness is just so strong that I'm certain that most other people must battle with it as well. On the other hand, if you're still willing to hang in there with me and my ramblings, think with me on James 4:1-3. That says, "Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members, or do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war, you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive, because you ask amiss, and that you may spend it on your own pleasures." So James exposes our self-centered motives. And once again, if you're like me, I really don't like looking at the entirety of this passage. Oh, I like the "you do not have because you do not ask" part, but the "you ask and do not receive because you ask amiss that you may spend it on your own pleasures" part, I don't care for that part as much. The truth of God's word pierces his light into the heart of my self-centeredness, and it exposes it as my own attempt to dethrone God in my life. And no, I never meant it to be that way. I simply wanted what I wanted. But in my battle to have my own way, I lose my trust in the Lord of my life. It's the unspoken idea that God really doesn't know what is best for my life, or that even if he does, my way is better. I stand amazed that after 26 years of walking with him and 19 of those years serving him in ministry, that I still struggle so much with such a seemingly simple issue of trust. So is having what we want or think we want or think that we should have really worth it? And for that matter, will we really end up with what we want anyway? How many Bible stories were written about someone who would stop at nothing, even dethroning God to have their own way? And how many times did it turn out like they wanted? I'll give you a few to remember. Remember Sarah's desire to have a baby and the mess that she made forcing it? Remember Esau's hunger and his desire for food caused him to sell his birthright for a mere bowl of beans. Remember Moses' desire for the people that he led to listen to him and to honor him. And in frustration, he struck the rock one too many times and he missed walking into the promised land. Remember Samson, who desired Delilah so much that he gave away his protective secrets to her, and he lost his strength, he lost his eyes, and he lost his freedom. And remember David's desire for Bathsheba, which led him to murder, led him to experience a family disaster and the death of his infant son. You know, if we would just learn to take God at his word, we would not have our own list of self-centered stories that cost us a high price and even others around us. And maybe it's just time that we stop the struggle. We face the undesirable feelings of facing our self-centeredness and go back to the basics of trusting God with everything, even our personal desires and longings. Let's bank everything on the unwavering foundation of God and his promises. Psalm 37:3-4 says, "Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Now, before I say goodbye, I want to invite you to join me on my ministry Facebook page to get daily morning prayers and biblical encouragement for Christian women. Also, don't forget to watch my On Fire Ministries Bible study devotion via Facebook Live. Every Tuesday morning, it's right here at 8:30 Central. And then please share this Bible study devotion with others that someone else can be encouraged. And until we meet again, have a blessed and beautiful day. Good morning, dear sisters in Christ.